So the people calling for the killing to end are the angry ones who are causing fear, and you calling for it to continue are the compassionate one. Do you see where you've ended up?
In the aftermath of the horrific tragedy at Bondi Beach, something deeply troubling has started to unfold here in the UK. Instead of restraint, reflection, or honesty, politicians and their allies in parts of the British media have rushed to weaponize that tragedy. They're now claiming that the context has changed, and that this somehow justifies banning pro-Palestine marches altogether. But here's the problem. The logic they're using isn't new, and it isn't sound. In fact, it's a recycled argument built on fear, emotional manipulation, and outright contradiction. And long before these latest calls to clamp down on protest, that logic was already exposed, line by line, in a live radio exchange with James O'Brien. This is what happens when moral panic replaces reason, when grief is turned into a political tool, and when calls for peace are reframed as threats, while calls for continued violence are dressed up as responsibility or compassion. Before we jump in, tell me where you're tuning in from, and remember to like and subscribe. Your support helps the channel grow and keeps these stories coming. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a debate about protests, it's a clear example of how power tries to silence dissent by twisting language, lowering standards and hoping nobody notices the contradictions. So let's watch this together. And when it's over, I'll break down exactly why this argument collapses the moment it's examined honestly.
I'll tell you what it is. With so much unrest and so much fear within the Jewish community, most of these pro-Palestinian protests erupt in violence. There's something, there's hate that's called out, and I think...
No, they don't, because I have to be clear on this, they don't erupt in violence. There have been I think there were 9 arrests and there have been 5 charges, including people arrested for attacking... Well, I'll run you through it all, actually. There's been a racially aggravated public order offence by a person of no fixed abode who allegedly shouted racist abuse. There's a public order offence after a can of beer was allegedly thrown at a protester in Whitehall. There's been an actual bodily harm charge after an officer was allegedly assaulted and suffered a head injury, which also happened at the Countryside Alliance March a few years ago. And then you've got another racially aggravated public order offence relating to an allegedly racist placard. And then you've got a 16-year-old boy who can't be identified because of his age, has been charged with a public order offence after directing verbal abuse at officers. So you understand I can't let you say they always erupt into violence when they categorically don't.
Well, there is a lot of hate. I mean, they're looking
let's
for...
not gloss over it. You have to accept that you cannot say they always erupt into violence when they categorically don't.
No, but there are things that the police won't and can't pick up on.
If that's the basis of your position, then your position becomes untenable immediately.
There is hate. Would you not agree with that?
There's hate everywhere. There's hate on the West Bank at the moment. You've seen what the American Secretary of...
Can I say anything?
Yes, of course you can, as long as it's true.
When you think about the fear that Jewish people are feeling all over the country, something that exacerbates that and something that makes them feel even more scared. I mean, there are no Jewish people that would feel comfortable to go into a Palestinian protest, and even the word
there were Jewish people on it. There
were
Jewish people on the march, and you've seen the footage from Central Station in New York as well of Jewish people protesting.
They're far extremists, and in terms of their support, their anti-Israel narrative. But that it's not. But if the fact is that people would be scared to go to a protest like that, whereas in direct contrast to that, the Israeli...
But again, I'm sorry you feel I'm interrupting you, but if you say things that aren't true, I have to. There were Jewish people on the march on Saturday.
Okay. But the majority...
So they wouldn't be... You can't say they'd be scared to go, can you?
It is very scary. It is very scary.
No, I'm not disputing that you're scared. I'm just disputing your claim that it always erupts into violence and that Jewish people would be too scared to attend to demonstrate their sympathy for Palestinian people being killed. Because neither of those things are true.
No, what I'm not saying is that people can't march in solidarity, but the fact is it's a protest which ends up often being anti-Israel. There were 3 women who were wearing pictures
out of 100,000 people.
That's not the point. The point is that
it is. Of course, it's the point. Of course, it's the point, because you can call those people hateful, you can call those people insightful, but you can't call the march a hate march. Because of what 3 women did.
There's a difference between a march and a protest rather than a vigil or solidarity. There's a big difference.
Well, you can call it whatever you want.
With hate. No, but there is a difference. You can't dispute that.
I can dispute anything I want.
Standing peacefully in vigil and market and thinking about the people that hurt the victims, etc. And absolutely, I think no one wants to see.
So it's the fact that they're walking.
Innocent civilians.
It's the fact that they're walking.
It has a much angrier tone.
Well, there's huge anger about all the Palestinians being killed, just as there was huge anger about all the Israelis killed on October the 7th. You must have been angry. You must have been angry.
I was devastated.
Okay.
It was heartbreaking.
Well, I was angry.
There's a very different.
I was very, very angry. I don't know if you heard the show. I was absolutely livid.
Yeah, but what were you angry about?
The murder of 1,400 Israelis.
But was that anger directed at the horrific terrorists?
Of course it was.
Was that compassion and devastation for the victims?
It was both. Unthinkable, unjustifiable, intolerable were the words that I used to describe what Hamas had done. Heartbreaking, utterly, utterly devastating were the words that I used to describe the victims. So why can't people be angry? Why can't people be angry about Palestinians being killed as well?
I just want to shout out that the first day that you did your show was brilliant. You were really compassionate, really kind, really sensitive, absolutely.
And really angry.
Yes, but I think there's more anger. It's about compassion and being devastated.
Anger being angry.
Necessarily do something.
And being angry. So if I'm allowed to be angry about the killing of Israelis, why can't I be angry about the killing of Gazans? Why can't people march in anger at the killing of Palestinians?
It's about compassion. That's the difference.
Okay. So how do people show their compassion?
Anger then says, who can I fight? Anger is, who can I punish?
Well, and that's why I had to pick you up at the beginning on the claims that it always erupted into violence when it simply doesn't. So no one's really looking for a fight.
Anger.
No one's looking for a fight.
I don't mean violence I mean violence as in anger, and that leads on to who can I blame?
You can't, unfortunately. Suella Braverman might want to outlaw anger, but even she would struggle to pull that one off, Anna. You can't tell people what they can and can't be angry about any more than I would dream of telling you.
Absolutely, but we can have expectations.
Go on.
The anger then channels into anti-Israel.
Well,
that is what happens.
And then it becomes problematic. But until it does, it isn't.
But
and when you say anti-Israel, you could say anti-Israeli army, anti-Likud.
But that's not true.
Well, I don't know that you can read the minds of everybody.
Very interesting. I don't know if you've looked at the works of the late Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs.
I'm familiar with some of his work, yes.
He has an incredible video that he's explaining how sometimes actually anti-Zionism is the new anti-Semitism. How it's changed over from the Middle Ages.
You're going a little bit off message now, because what we're talking.
You're saying that it's not anti-Israel. It's also anti-Semitic.
I'm not. I'm saying you can't read anybody's mind. There are plenty of people in Israel who've got huge problems with what is going on. Are they anti-Semitic?
And that's what I believe Suella Braverman.
Are they anti-Semitic?
No, people can have issues with the policies.
People can be angry about policies, and they can be Jewish, and they can be angry with Israeli policies, but you wouldn't dream of calling them anti-Semitic.
But I haven't heard any pro-Palestinian march that's come out to condemn Hamas.
Well, how much attention have you been paying? How many of them have you spoken to?
Plenty.
Really?
Yeah, it's very interesting having conversations.
But you were too frightened to attend.
An excuse.
You were too frightened to attend.
But I would never go to a protest.
So when did you talk to them?
Other people.
So when did you talk to them?
I've spoken to individuals.
Yeah, when?
With their opinions.
When?
Over the last couple of weeks.
How?
And there's always an excuse.
But how have you spoken to these? How have you spoken? No, of course you can't. Not if you're going to come on my radio and say things that aren't true.
But it is true.
Well, of course it isn't. Every single
Ariana Grande concert.
Well, I don't want to imagine that. I'm talking about marches. Stop it.
I feel bad for the people that were killed, but
you're making stuff up again.
Very, very frustrated.
You're making stuff up again.
No, I'm not. That's exact same parallel.
You're having an imaginary conversation about a completely different atrocity.
No, but what I'm saying to you is the fact is that there needs to be condemnation.
Just before you go, where is your expression? I know you would avail yourself of this opportunity, your compassion for the people being killed in Gaza now.
Absolutely. I said that straight away. I said that earlier on. I said, I do not want to see any innocent civilians, and it's horrific, and it's heartbreaking, and I read an article.
So would you call for it to end then?
I would call for Israel to do whatever it can to.
Well, you can't have it both ways, can you?
It's called self-defense.
Okay, well, that's not called compassion then.
and they've
No, that's
notified
fine.
all the residents to move.
We got there in the
It
end.
is compassion, of course there is compassion.
Well, no, because the people marching are calling for a ceasefire, and you're calling for it to continue, while claiming that, while complaining that that other people aren't being compassionate. So the people calling for the killing to end are the angry ones who are causing fear, and you calling for it to continue are the compassionate one. Do you see where you've ended up, Anna?
No, but
No,
Israel
you
could have
probably don't. Do you?
And this is where the call stops being just an argument on the radio and starts looking uncomfortably like a blueprint for what we're now seeing play out in real time. The caller's emotional reasoning, stripped of facts, driven by fear, is exactly the same logic now being used to justify a sweeping crackdown on the civil liberties of protesters. She claimed the marches erupt into violence. James dismantled that claim with verifiable facts. She labeled the marchers hateful. James exposed the contradiction at the heart of that accusation by showing that, in her framework, compassion somehow meant accepting the continuation of mass killing. And that distinction matters, because words like anger, hate, and violence are being deliberately blurred. The Bondi Beach attack was an act of terrorism, carried out by an individual inspired by ISIS, a group that is openly hostile to the Palestinian cause and has nothing to do with the mainstream Palestine solidarity movement. Yet that atrocity is now being cynically repurposed. Authorities and media figures are dishonestly linking it to pro-Palestinian protests, not because the connection exists, but because it is politically useful. This is not about safety, it's about narrative control. By conflating an act of terror with a political protest, they create a justification to silence voices they already wanted to shut down. When the Metropolitan Police announced potential arrests over specific chants, the explanation offered was that violent acts have now taken place. But look closely at what's happening there. A tragedy thousands of miles away is being used to retroactively criminalize political expression at home. That's not proportionate policing, that's opportunism. The same mindset James exposed in that call, where peace marchers are framed as dangerous while state violence is excused as necessary, is now shaping policy. Anger directed at injustice is being treated as a threat, while the devastation that fuels that anger is quietly ignored. Protest is recast as provocation, dissent is reframed as extremism. And once that logic is accepted, the precedent is set. Because the core questions James asked that caller are no longer hypothetical. They are questions we should now be putting directly to those in power. How can you claim that people calling for an end to violence are the problem? How can you invoke compassion while refusing to call for peace? And how can a tragedy be used as cover to restrict freedoms that have nothing to do with that tragedy at all? That's the real issue here. Not public order, not safety, but whether grief is being exploited to erode the right to protest. So I'm genuinely interested in what you think. Is banning these marches a necessary security measure, or does it cross the line into a dangerous political crackdown on free expression? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.